Cloning is a favorite among video games, books, and the media. However, it is not as clear-cut as one would expect. There are many different details to go into when discussing cloning. While it may not be a very simple process, it isn't at all complicated either. Cloning has been shown in various science fiction films, but what is it, and is it really possible? Join us now as we dig deeper into this topic on Interesting. Cloning, shown in most science fiction movies, features genetically and mentally identical copies of an organism, with some slight exceptions here and there. Now, cloning, in terms of genetics, is the creation of an organism that is an exact genetic copy of another. Well, as genetically identical as it gets, since 1% of a person's DNA is mitochondrial DNA from the egg of the mother. Now, how can cloning be possible? Well, there's a couple of ways this can be done. Artificial embryo twinning and somatic cell nuclear transfer, abbreviated as SNT for short. Okay. In nature, twins occur just after fertilization of an egg cell by a sperm cell. In rare cases, when the resulting fertilized egg, called a zygote, tries to divide into a two-celled embryo, the two cells separate. Each cell continues dividing on its own, ultimately developing into a separate individual within the mother. Since two cells came from the same zygote, the resulting individuals are genetically identical. Artificial embryo twinning uses the same approach, but it occurs in a petri dish instead of in the mother's body. This is accomplished by manually separating a very early embryo into individual cells, and then allowing each cell to divide and develop on its own. The resulting embryos are placed into a surrogate mother, where they are carried to term and delivered. Again, since all the embryos came from the same zygote, they are genetically identical. So to sum things up, egg, propel, zygote, divide, separate, multiply, two individuals. Now, how could we go and talk about cloning without mentioning Dolly the sheep? Dolly was cloned by Alan Wilmot, Keith Campbell, and colleagues at the Roslin Institute near Edinburgh, Scotland. SCNT was the exact method used to create Dolly, who has been called the world's most famous sheep. To make Dolly, researchers isolated a somatic cell from an adult female sheep. Next, they transferred the nucleus from that cell to an egg cell from which the nucleus had been removed. After a couple of chemical tweaks, the egg cell with its new nucleus was behaving just like a freshly fertilized zygote. It developed into an embryo, which was implanted into a surrogate mother and carried to term. However, sad news arrived on February 14, 2003, when Dolly counted sheep and never stopped. She was born on July 5, 1996, and lived until the age of 6. Fortunately, she suffered from a progressive lung disease, which cost her her life. Misconceptions about cloning have been featured usually in science fiction films. Most of these myths appear preposterous and somehow plausible. One of these myths is that cloning an organism will make another genetically and mentally identical person. Let's get things straight here. Cloning methods found today have only proven to replicate the genes of an ancestor, and not the knowledge. Technically, it recreates the genotype, not the phenotype. Even at that, only 99% of those genes get replicated because 1% of such child's genes would come from those located within the egg, mitochondrial DNA. Another misconception is that cloning organisms would appear at the same age as the original. Cloning is an alternative way to create an embryo. It doesn't make another organism the same age as the original. Therefore, the embryo would grow just like any other. Another famous one is cloning an organism would make another organism the same age and intelligence, except they will have a dominant personality over the rest. This misconception has been used in films and movies worldwide. A person's wisdom, which includes personality, depends on the environment in which they grew up in. In conclusion, watch what you say about cloning, because it may not be simple, but it sure sounds cool. But don't take my word for it, just ask some of my clones. Happy, sad, dorky, magical, cool, creepy, funny, evil, and... Hey, wait. Where'd the evil one go? No!